You've spoken about the church having gone inward, maybe the antithesis of the kind of posture that you're envisioning for the church. And can you just comment on how this has happened and what you see as the consequences of the church going inward?
There's a lot of historical reasons for why the church has turned inward and away from interest in the culture and the society around us. Much of it goes back to the history of the 20th century and the fundamentalist movement and the withdrawal from universities and areas of learning and sort of a separatism. We've been coming out of that in the last 25, 30 years in evangelicalism, but not to the extent we need to. Most people, and the poll data shows this, most people, if you think about what the church is, what Christianity is, will talk about a relationship with Jesus. It, of course, is far more than that. I mean, let's go to the beginning of the Bible. In the beginning, God spoke us into being, gave us dominion over his creation, told us to name the animals, intellectual tasks, taught us to till and cultivate. We, in a sense, pick up the creation mandate all through the Bible. It's Christians, believers are charged with this. Bible believers are charged with this. But the church today is much more concerned about recruiting. I've often said it's more interested in recruiting than in repentance. That's harsh. There are a lot of churches that aren't like that. But the measure of the church today in a culture which exalts success, particularly material success, is the bigness of the buildings and how fast the church is growing. To me, the growth of a church is when it grows in its spiritual commitment. Spiritual commitment mandates, in my opinion, that we are concerned not just with our own growth in discipleship, but we are concerned with the extent to which Christian values permeate the culture around us. John Wesley once said, "There's no holiness apart from social holiness." All the great Christian writers through the years have argued that if you're really going to make a difference, Calvin said, you'll know the church has been there if the culture around it has been transformed. So if we're not really engaged in the culture, winsomely making a case for Christian faith, then I don't think we're being the church. And when I started on this little effort to try to get the church energized to thinking about all of life and not just about ourselves and not just about our happy times in the koinonia in the church and not just about church projects, but thinking about the world, the community, and the world beyond. One poll by George Barna showed that only 4% of Christian people even understood what a biblical worldview was. So that tells me we're self-obsessed, we're self-directed. If we're going to ever see a change in America, and if America is going to be able to make the impact in the world that it should be making, then it has to start with the church.
And if you had to put your finger on efforts that would help bring this transformation about, where would you focus that energy?
Well, George Barna did a survey, an extensive survey, has done several, as a matter of fact, over the last 5 or 10 years on this subject. And he believes that it's the lack of understanding a worldview that is keeping the church basically impotent in terms of its ability to affect culture around it. And I would say that if there was one thing you could do in the church today, and it's almost impossible to isolate it to one thing, because we've got to be deeper in the Bible, we've got to be faithful to the Bible, we've got to understand the nature of God, many things the church has to do. But the one thing that is most neglected and which has the most immediate effect in transforming the way in which the church sees itself in the world is to form a biblical worldview. When I say biblical worldview, I'm talking about seeing all of life through God's eyes. That's really basically what it means. It means understanding that the Bible gives us a whole formula for how life is lived, that there is a natural order to life. There's a way the world is supposed to be, and we are to fit ourselves into that. That's what a biblical worldview does. So we've got to think about more than ourselves, more than a self-centered Christianity. We've got to be thinking about an other-directed Christianity, a Christianity that looks out as to how it's going to impact culture.